And they always say the NFL, and you've heard this term, Jody, is a meritocracy.
Yeah.
Mainly it is. Mainly it is, but sometimes it isn't. And I would use Nate Herbig as an example of that because no matter how well he played, it was like, let's get Jack Driscoll ready. No matter how, even Suo Peta, he's a Tesla stock. We got to get Suo. It was always, they were waiting for the other foot with Nate Herbig.
Get together here on Birds 365 with the Mac guys, McMullen and McDonald. Got a couple of good guests coming your way. We'll give you the details on that in just a second. Johnny Mac thought yesterday would be all analysis, and I thought getting a chance to hear from AJ Brown was a little insightful. You learned a couple of things. But the Eagles had to make a move yesterday after we got off the air. Nate Herbig, who they offered a contract tender to, and he accepted it this week, then gets turned around and released after the Eagles had made at least seemed like a quasi commitment to him. Was this all just for the purpose of a trade? I gotta admit, I'm not 100% understanding what the hell came down between the Eagles and Nate Herbig.
Yeah, it is mainly for the trade. I mean, the Eagles were trying to trade him, and for whatever reason, weren't able to get anything. It's a more difficult time of year. I thought they'd be able to get something for Nate. If you go back to last year in the summer with Matt Pryor, they were able to get a 6 round pick, I think it was. But that's a different time of year when teams have already, this time of year, I always joke, Jody, everybody's great. Everybody's great. Your fourth round offensive guard, we think he's going to be a real player for us. And, you haven't gotten him on the field yet. And once you get him on the field, and you start to say to yourself, well, this kid's probably not ready. Then you start looking at the Matt Pryors of the world, and they probably would have been able to deal Nate Herbig maybe at that point. I know his agent asked for a trade. He saw the writing on the wall, and just from a numbers perspective, and the Eagles saw it too. But I will say something about Nate. We talk about pedigree all the time. For whatever reason, and maybe it was his body, which he kind of remade with the help of Lane Johnson and those guys at the Bro Barn in South Jersey, but they never expected him to play well. And man, I mean, he was always forced in the lineup due to injuries over the past 2 seasons. He was always the last resort, and he always played well. He always played well. And they always say the NFL, and you've heard this term, Jody, is a meritocracy.
Yeah.
Mainly it is. Mainly it is, but sometimes it isn't. And I would use Nate Herbig as an example of that because no matter how well he played, it was like, let's get Jack Driscoll ready. No matter how, even Suo Peta, he's a Tesla stock. We got to get Suo. It was always, they were waiting for the other foot with Nate Herbig. Um, and I never saw it come. I'm not going to overstate it and say he's great, but I will say he's better than those guys. You know,
It was he
and and
was
and by the way, those guys aren't bad. That's not an insult. Um, but he was better than them, and they didn't expect it. They didn't think it would continue. It's a little strange to me the way Nate Herbig was treated, but he'll get another job even at this stage, and he'll get an opportunity to play more somewhere else, or at least be higher on the depth chart. He actually played quite a bit here because
yeah.
of all the injuries, but it was injury related, and you hope some good luck returns and you stay healthy and you won't need any of your backups. It's probably not realistic, but yeah, I mean, I I'm I not that Pro Football Focus is the be all end all, but you know, 2020 they ranked him the 13th best guard out of 80 in the league. 13. And last year it wasn't quite as good, but it was 31 of 82. Still pretty good.
Right. If he's in the top half, that's not bad at all.
Especially for an undrafted free agent.
Agreed. And you and I talked about this yesterday, that you always like to have one of those guys. The general manager likes to have one of those guys on the roster for bragging purposes. You know, we found this guy. No one else in the league. We brought him in as an undrafted free agent, and look at the production we've gotten out of him. So that's why it's at least in part a little surprising that the Eagles severed ties and parted ways yesterday. I'm going to be the glass half empty guy here, I guess. If they did give him the tender, and they did so, remember, ahead of time before they drafted Cam Jurgens. They didn't know they were going to be able to get a guy like Jurgens in the second round. So there was a dynamic that changed in the middle of it. But, you know, they had to at least be thinking, hey, if we give him the tender, then we can at least try and trade him on draft day, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm sure that after they traded Cam Jurgens, they reached out to a bunch of teams and said, because we've got this new guy who's going to fill in and be our center for the next decade, we'd be willing to part with Nate Herbig. What kind of draft pick would you give us? And apparently the answer came back zero. No teams were interested in paying for him at this time. And you're right. Somebody will sign him. He'll be on somebody else's at least roster and get a chance to compete in camp. But that's because they won't have to do anything. They won't have to pay him. They won't have to pay him the tender offer that the Eagles gave him. It'll be closer to the NFL veteran minimum. They overestimated. You have your own opinion of the player. And you're right. We have a different look at the kid because he's playing for us. He has to fill in for us because the Eagles have had injuries on their offensive line. So you might rate him a little bit higher than any other team or Pro Football Focus might. The rest of the NFL spoke, John. They won a team. If there was one team that was ready to give him a seventh rounder, they would have taken the seventh rounder. Because
no, you're right.
48 hours after the draft is over, they give the guy his release.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say they could have gotten anything. They obviously couldn't have gotten anything, and that's why I bring up the time of year. And as I said, I mean, I see it every year. Everybody's like, oh, we're good. We're good. We got this fourth round and long cornerback, and he's going to step in. And then you get him in mini camp, and you go, oh, there's some work to do here. And then there's no mandatory mini camp here in Philadelphia, at least, obviously, but even that's not a lot of work. And you get to training camp, and all of a sudden you start to look at your young players and say, all you got to do is look every year. The vast majority are not ready to play. I mean, it's no secret around the NFL, but it's a something that recycles every year. Every team does it. They're like, wow, we're really excited about this guy. We're really excited about this kid. And they get to training camp and they realize, oh, he's not ready. And then they go out and they got to get a veteran player through whether they're released or traded. And the Eagles could have played hardball. They did Nate Herbig a favor. They could have played hardball and waited till the summer and probably gotten a Matt Pryor type deal late in the process, and then probably you should argue, you should play hardball. Why give up players? Why just release them? Remember, the top 51 rule is in effect. It's not affecting your salary cap.
But he's a top 51
guy.
No,
yeah, but it's not. In other words, it's not affecting your salary cap. It's not hamstringing you in any way.
It is, John, because he's one of their top 51 guys. So as of today, they released him. Someone moved up from the bottom of the 51 to replace Nate Herbig. So they added.
No, I get it, Jody, but it's a small amount. In other words, we're not talking about a $15 million player. It's not having a massive effect on your salary cap, is what I'm trying to say. So you can carry him as long as you want to carry him and cut him. And, you get the same thing if you can't get anything. But if somebody has injuries, if somebody says we stink on the offensive line, and believe me, there are at least 10 teams in this league, and I'm probably being kind, that are going to be sitting there in the last week of August and saying, wow, we really stink on the offensive line. It's just an offensive line deficient league. They could have played hardball. They could have kept him around. They could have tried for the Matt Pryor deal. But yeah, he wasn't going to play here, so they released him. And it speaks to the depth of this organization, because you can argue there are a few teams that can credibly claim that they might have the best offensive line in football, along with the Eagles, but not with the depth. Not when you add in the depth. The Eagles' depth is absurd on the offensive line, and the fact that the 13th ranked guard 2 years ago is third string.
All right, then
that says it all.
Here I go playing devil's advocate again. If the offensive line depth is as great as you're describing it, that they're arguably, just for the starters, in the conversation for the best offensive line, and then when you add in the depth, you might have to call them the best offensive line in football. Why the hell they use a second-round pick on an offensive lineman?
Well, because they know Jason Kelsey's going to retire. I mean,
well, how about the great depth that you're describing, that the Eagles have this unbelievable amount of depth? How many guys do they have on their roster right now who played center? Dickerson.
Well, there's a big difference between, I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to, at the beginning of this, I said, I don't want to overstate it. There's a big difference between the talent level of a Nate Herbig or a Sua Opeta or a Coyote Awasika, these guys that they've developed, and Jeff Stoutland's been able to develop in a high-level draft pick like Cam Jurgens last year with Landon Dickerson. Now, yeah, they have a bunch of guys who can play center. You know, Stoutland's told me for years that's probably Isaac's best position, Isaac Seumalo, which is interesting. By the way, before the Nate move, I started thinking, you know, they might cut Isaac Seumalo because he makes so much money and they have so much depth on the offensive line. They went in a different direction, went with Nate Herbig. On the very day I was writing about it, typical bad luck. But you know, there's a big difference between the Landon Dickersons of the world and the Cam Jurgens of the world and guys who are up at that level of the draft. Now, Howie said, look, they saw Jordan Mailata, and I've been saying this for months on this show. They saw Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson together. They're not moving that. They aren't moving that. So everybody was talking about it. I've said it a bunch of times. It ain't happening. And obviously Kelsey's going to be there, you know, probably just for this year. And who knows if it's successful, maybe runs it back. But I think it's pretty clear indication by the way they're acting. He's probably giving them, you know, this is probably it talk as far as being his potential final season. And then you have right guard. Obviously, you have Lane Johnson. So right guard is the one uncertainty. And I know when he talked about it, Nick Sirianni during the draft said Isaac has played a lot of football. And this is the reason I started the story, Jody. But he also brought up everybody else. Nick Sirianni loves Jack Driscoll. Loves him. He loves Jack Driscoll like Jeff Stoutland loves Isaac Seumalo. So, you know.
Does he love Jack Driscoll like he loves Zach Pascal?
Yes. Yes. He's a bus guy. Jack Driscoll's a bus guy. Zach Pascal's a bus guy. You want to be on the bus with him, blah, blah, blah. By the way, Zach blocked me on Twitter. I'm hurt by that, Zach Pascal.
Really?
I think he should have blocked you, not me. I think I'm incredibly fair.
I'm much more questioning.
I think I'm incredibly fair, well, Zach Pascal.
I guess I'd have to follow Zach Pascal to be blocked. So yeah. If he's attempted to block me, I didn't even think
I was following him. He went out of his way to block me, so I'm a little hurt by that.
Well, no, wait, you had to be following him to know that he blocked you, right? How would you know that?
No, I couldn't read his tweet. I saw everybody retweeting something he tweeted, and I couldn't read it. And I'm like, why can't I read this tweet?
Oh, somebody else.
He was just talking about changing his uniform number because AJ's taking 11. I did make a quip about that. I said, what's your favorite moment of the Zach Pascal number 11 era? But I mean, come on, that's a joke. There's I mean, because he had it for a couple weeks and I had to give it to AJ. But anyway, I digress. I'm a little hurt by that, Zach Pascal. Closed circuit. where was I on? Right guard. So he specifically brought up how well Jack Driscoll played, and he did. Jack played well, but he got hurt again, so he's been hurt uh, for his first two professional seasons. Has had injuries. He brought up Nate. He brought up Sua, and he said, Howie was a little bit different, and he said Cam Jurgens is a center. He's not going to play guard unless they need him, unless three guys get injured. Then you got to force a guy into the lineup. But it was interesting that he wouldn't say it was Isaac's job, and that's where I said to myself, well, he is really expensive. He's coming off a Lisfranc injury. I think the number is 12 games. He's played 12 games over the last 2 years because of injuries. And they do like Jack Driscoll. I thought it was more about Jack than anything else. And they felt, hey, if we can get the same level of play from Jack Driscoll as Isaac for a whole lot less money, maybe that opens the door. I never gave credence to Nate. It was correct. One, because they think his most natural position is left guard, but they just never, it's weird to me how well he's performed, and they just always kept him in that box off to the side saying, well, we got to get better than that. We got to get better than that. No. We got to get better than that.
You keep saying how well he performed. He played this well that no team would give a 7th rounder for him. We can have our opinion of him. We can look at him in the Eagle context and what he gave them and where he fit and everything. But the entire National Football League had a chance to chime in and go, we'll take this guy for a 7th rounder. A 7th rounder. And 31 of 31 said, no, thank you. They all passed on him. And I get your point about it this time of year. Everybody believes that the guys they have are good enough, and then they actually get a closer look and go, oh, shoot, we're not good enough. But still, if he's as good as you're making him sound, somebody should have given up a 7th rounder for him.
Well, it's a fair point. I'm not disputing the point, but what I'm saying is you should know better. You should know better. You're the team that watched it. These other teams are the ones with the crappy offensive line that think they've had crappy offensive line. Let's look at, I always bring up Seattle and Minnesota because they've literally had crappy offensive lines for a decade. Now they're always taking on, we're going to take this kid in the 4th round. We're going to develop this. They don't know how to develop offensive linemen. So it doesn't surprise me that they want the newly minted kid from wherever, LSU or Alabama or wherever, and say, well, he's going to step in and he's going to be a star. They don't know how to develop offensive line. They've had bad offensive lines for a decade. And there's 10 more teams you could say the same thing about. Let them make the bad decisions. You guys are supposed to know, and that's the confusing part to me, Jody. You're focused on the other teams. I'm focused on this team and saying, I mean, what more do you want the kid to do? I don't, and they didn't believe on me. They didn't believe in him. That's the strange part to me.
Here's where your point is accurate, but also an issue for other teams. Nate Herbig is that good, however you're going to come about rating Nate Herbig. Use Pro Football Focus, use what you can pick up off tape, and you look and go, yeah, but that's with Stoutland coaching him. We don't have Stoutland here.
Yeah, well,
so if we pick him up, is he going to be able to play as well as he did for Philadelphia? Here for us, the answer is no. So, yeah, we'll keep our 7th round draft pick. Sorry, Howie Roseman, we're not making a trade for the kid.
And that's probably your best argument. You probably sold me he's not going to be as good, and he'll probably look like an undrafted free agent.
That is part of what the Eagles had to deal with. It was just weird that they gave him the tender. You and I kind of batted it back and forth on who you want to use that tender on. I was more of a Boston Scott guy. To Howie's credit, he got Boston back and didn't have to go to the tender number to do so. So he played his cards exactly right there. I was surprised they did it with Herbeck. We now can see why they did it. They thought they were going to end up trading him. And as soon as they got Jurgens, I'm sure they tried. And within 48 hours, he's no longer an Eagle because they chose to release him. If they did a favor by him and that makes Howie Roseman look good, I'm sure he's going to try and bank that at some point. But you give a guy a tender and it can play both ways. If you're a guy who gets a tender in the future and you're a Philadelphia Eagle, you can go, Yeah, but that don't mean diddly because they turn around and release Nate. I was here when they released Nate. So it's the roster games that all teams have to play. Part of it is the NFL draft. And we just got finished with the 3 days and the rounds that the Eagles look great in, and the round that I don't think they quite handled as well as they possibly could have. Coming up next, our buddy Rick Saratella from NFL Draft Bible is going to jump aboard. He came on with us umpteen times leading up to the draft. We're going to get Rick up here and get his thoughts on the Eagles draft. We'll talk about the whole draft as well, but Eagle-centric with Rick Saratella from NFL Draft Bible next here on Birds 365.